Right, so in this video we're going to be looking at getting started using Grasshopper, some very basic use of the some tools and nodes and scripting. To begin, Grasshopper is a plugin to Rhino, so that means we open Rhino first and then open Grasshopper by just typing Grasshopper into the command line. And hitting enter, and then the Grasshopper interface will show up itself. So the way that I usually set up the screen is like this. In Rhino, I will use double click to make the perspective viewport the whole screen, and then kind of slide it over here to the left, and then make the right half of the screen the Grasshopper interface. You'll be using both at the same time, and that will be clearer in a minute when we start using the nodes. So first, if you expand this a little bit, we can actually read these tabs a little better. So all of our tools are up here on these tabs. So thinking about the tools that we have looked at so far in Rhino, this curve tools, all of these buttons are tools that will, nodes that will come up in Grasshopper, surfaces, meshes, all the kind of things that we can draw in Rhino, we can now control that geometry through Grasshopper. So let's look at a very simple one under the primitives, those curves and primitives. We'll just look at a circle. So if we click on that, and then just click on the background, it drops this thing here which is called a node. And that, if we look over here, peek back over here in Rhino, what has happened is that has now drawn this circle on the plane. And so the output of this node is a circle. If you hover over the right side of the node, it gives you what the output is. If you hover over the left side, it is telling you what the input is. So it's the plane, and this is the default value is the world XY. So that's why we get this red grid here. That's what the plane that circle is on. And then it has a radius. And then we can control that radius by, it has a default value of 1. We can change that. So another way to get any of the nodes is by just double clicking on the background, and you will you can type in. So I could have found the circle and just by starting to type circle. But what we want now is in order to control the radius of that circle is this node called number slider. So let's move that down here and link that. So we'll click and drag that to connect it to the R, to the radius. And now what that's doing, you saw that over here the circle changed diameter or radius, and that is controlled by this number slider. So the input value for that radius is changing when we slide this node here. And you can double click that and actually even change the domain that is that. So from right now, it's the domain for that radius is from 0 to 1. We can change that and make this whatever we like. Say we wanted it to be 10. And now you can make an even bigger circle. So much more flexibility given this circle that we have. We can remove that background grid if we actually just go up here to it says C2 surface, primitive plane surface, and plug that plane into there. And then turn off the preview of that plane. And now we will just have a circle. So that little function that I did was actually really useful when modeling. That I right-clicked on the geometry on the node, and you can click preview, and it will turn off that geometry. So that'll be useful. And once we get a more complicated model, you want to be able to control what is on the screen, so you're controlling, be able to see what the parts that you're modeling. So let's do something a little more complex with this circle that we've created. And what we want to do is get a node called divide curve. So let's look at what that is. The input is some kind of curve, a count or a number, and kinks, which we'll get to potentially in a later. But right now we just need the geometry and a number. So we'll plug it in the circle. You see all these little X's came, and those are the output of these points along that circle curve. And we can do lots of stuff with this now. We have many points. We can actually change the number of points. So if we just when you have a thing that's a number that is giving you a real number, not a or an integer rather than a real number, you can change that by double-clicking on the number slider and changing it from a real number to a integer. And now you're actually, when you slide this, it will go right only integers. So that makes more sense when you have something that like divide, that is going to give you 4 things, not 4.92 things. So we have these two parameters now that are linking the geometry that's shown on the screen. We have a radius and we have the count. We could, once you get more complicated pieces of modeling descriptions, you can actually have one node control both. So if we wanted to have that radius be the same, for some reason, be the same number of points, now you'll just have one slider that is controlling both the radius and the number of divides, which perhaps may make sense in some instances for some things that you want to model, and might not for others. So start to think about the point of that is really to reduce the number of sliders, of number of parameters that is controlling your model. You want to be able to create really complicated things with the minimum number of parameters that you have to adjust. So another really useful tool that you can use often is this node called panel. And panel will tell you what is the output. So this one, if you link it to that, it's telling you the output is a circle, and it tells you all the information about it. It tells you the radius is 4.2, which its length is this data right back here. This one, if we link the panel to this node, it tells us a lot more complicated data. We have 7 points which is from this count. It goes from the index of 0 to 6, so you get 7. It always starts with 0. And that is one of the points. So remember the panel. It will often tell you what kinds of data is coming out of these nodes, and that might lead you to think about what you can do with that data next. So for example, on this one we have all these points, and now we can put some geometry at those points. We can, for example, use put circles on each of these, and that be the center point of each of those circles. So we can actually, rather than finding the circle back up here or double clicking and typing, we could actually copy and paste. So we just Control C, Control V that circle. It does bring along the links, but you can disconnect those either by manually just disconnecting like that. I right clicked on the node that on the input that I want to disconnect, and then scroll to disconnect and click there. Or it will automatically disconnect if you plug in a different input. So let's, what we actually want to do is put these points into the plane. And now we might want, for this example, we might want a different radius. So we can make those circles much smaller. And now we have these 7 or various different kind of circles that we can put instead of those points. We can go in and unpreview the center points. We could even, if this information wasn't important, we could turn off the preview of that circle. And now we just have these circles which we can adjust. We can just still all of these. The information the information flows through these nodes that are turned off, but is still feeding the end geometry that we are interested in representing. There's also an effort to reduce the number of sliders. You can do certain math operations. So if we look at the geometry that we have described here, this is 6.4. This is about 6. This is about 3. So that's in this. If we wanted to do be able to control that, this radius is about half the size of that one. So we could actually go in and use a math operation and choose divide. Let's see, where's that division? Here. And we can use this because it's a whole number. Let's copy and paste that and make it 2. You can also double click on the number and type in the number that you want rather than sliding it. So if we plug this number into A and this 2 into B, now we have whatever this is divided in half all the time, and we can plug that into the radius instead of this number, and now leave this locked as 2. And now when we adjust this one, it's adjusting both of the circles, the overall radius and the radius of each of these counted circles are changing with just adjusting one slider. So that those are the basic operations in the kinds of things that we'll be doing to begin in Grasshopper. All of this, by the way, is a Grasshopper file. We haven't actually done anything in Rhino. It's just showing up over here as a potential geometry. In order to make that as geometry in Rhino, as if we drew it in Rhino, you need to do a operation that's called bake. So if you right click on whatever geometry you want, and it will highlight green when it's highlighted here. If you right click on there and say bake and click there, and it make sure that you put it on the appropriate layer. So you'll have named these layers what you want them, what makes sense for your model, and then put this geometry on the appropriate layer, and say OK. And now if we just turn the preview off of that, we now see that this is actual geometry in Rhino, as if we had drawn these circles in Rhino. But it's now, these are no longer parametric. So if you move these out of the way and actually re-preview this description is this for this geometry, but we have moved it over there. It's no longer parametric. So if we adjust these numbers now, the former one is that we baked in Rhino is not adjusting anymore. It's now a static model, but we can we could change this and bake it again and have lots of different variations of kind of similar things all baked into Rhino, perhaps on different layers, so we can turn them on and turn them off and do different things with them. Let's turn off that preview, move that to out of the way, and then we can keep going and do lots of different things with these potential models, all described from the same script, just changing the input parameters. So that is how to get started in Grasshopper.